Good morning. I'm Alan Sproat, and I'm a worship associate here at Horizon. We are excited to welcome you to our worship service this morning. We are so glad to have you with us today, whether you're joining us in person or virtually, whether you're here for the first time, or whether you've been here for longer than you can remember. Here at Horizon, we welcome people of all faiths and of no faith in particular. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your journey, you are welcome among us.
Our call to worship this morning comes from the writings of the Reverend Gretchen Haley. She writes, "This world goes too fast to say all the stories that fill our lives. We struggle for the words and the friends that would listen, that would witness this much beauty, this relentless loss, this courage to continue on, claiming confidence and joy. Here in this place, let us mark time as if it is our friend, not running away, but offering itself with a new abundance, like a gift, ready to offer healing and mercy in the breathing together and the silence and the paying attention, in the music and in the mystery. Not everything can be fixed in an hour. Not everything can be forgiven or saved. But here we remember that this is how we begin, moment by moment, making our lives one choice, one spark of hope, one willing yes at a time. Come, let us worship together." We light our chalice this morning with words from the Reverend Sherry Woodbury. She writes, "Spark of the Spirit, cupped in earth's embrace, light of love, alive in all creation, as we kindle this flame, we rekindle our connection to the sacred web of life." I invite you to join me in saying together the words of our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of our church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in harmony with the earth. Thus do we covenant together. I invite you to rise, either in body or in spirit, and join in singing our opening hymn, "Come Sing a Song with Me."
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind.
So at this time, I'd like to invite all of our new members to come forward in the front, and let's form kind of a little semicircle up here. So we'd like to present you with some gifts. If Sandy will help us out by distributing them. We have some beautiful flowers. We also have some packets if other folks want to help out distributing those. But we share this flower as a symbol of a new beginning, both for you, folks who are joining, and also for this congregation to have you among us. As I read each one of your names, will you please raise your hand so that folks can know you by name and by face? So today we welcome Bruce. Will you raise your hands? And we also welcome Bruce's wife, Donna, who couldn't be here this morning, but she's also a new member. We welcome Jacqueline. Yes. And we also welcome Aaron and also their children. We welcome Evie, although I don't believe she could be here this morning. We also welcome Nate. We welcome Michelle and Ian. Hello. We welcome Nicole. Hi. We welcome Susan. We welcome Kay. We welcome Madison and Margot and also Rose. We welcome Andy, and we welcome Chrissy, and we welcome Kim. Wonderful. Thank you all. I'm so glad to have you here. We're honored that you have chosen to become part of our religious community. We value your participation, your thoughts, and your feelings. Welcome to our church. May we be worthy of your trust. When you signed the book, you agreed to the rights and responsibilities of membership, meaning regular attendance at worship, voting at congregational meetings, making financial contributions, and contributing your time and your talent. I'd now invite our new members to read where it says new members in the insert, and the congregation's going to need to read in a minute, so you might want to get that handy. We join with you as members of the Horizon Unitarian Universalist Church, conferring our covenant to uphold the rights and responsibilities of membership. We commit to be in service to the mission of this congregation, to welcome radically, love boldly, grow spiritually, and serve courageously. We willingly enter into the covenant that binds us together as a religious community, honoring each other wherever we may be on the path to becoming more fully human. And I invite you now, the members of the congregation, to read your response. We welcome you into membership in our congregation. As members of Horizon Unitarian Universalist Church, we join together to challenge and nurture one another in our efforts to speak honestly, to act with compassion, to love without prejudice, to live with integrity, and to respond to the demands of justice with courage. We pledge to support our church as we are able, with our hearts and hands, our talents and resources, that together might become a more effective instrument of service, a voice for liberation, reason, and tolerance, and a community in which we can celebrate all that life brings to us. So friends, at this time, may we rejoice together with these folks who we have welcomed into our spiritual community. We are excited for them and also for us that we have new people with which to practice radical welcome, love that is bold, to grow our spirits, and to serve alongside. We are all blessed. Let us now join together in singing our children off to their classes. Thank you.
May your mind be open to new learning. May your lips bring truth into the world. May your heart call love and your hand to the work of justice as you go your way in peace. As you go your way in peace.
So I'm here to introduce the Share the Plate recipient for the month of March. I'm stepping in for Minika, who's at the Southwest UU Women's Conference. So we're going to show a brief video first, and then I'll just say a few words.
Hello, I'm Derek Mitchell of the Unitarian Universalist Holding India program, speaking from Washington, D.C.
Shreya Bhattacharya of the Holding India program, speaking from New Delhi, India.
Since 1984, this program of the Unitarian Universalist Association has been making grants to grassroots groups in India. We work with those organizing for social and economic justice, struggling for gender equality, fair wages and safe workplaces, freedom from discrimination, and indigenous peoples' rights.
A cornerstone of our approach is partnership. We partner with organizations for the long term because we see that deep, sustainable change doesn't happen through a 3-year project. Our partnerships continue in some cases for decades, evolving into relationships of trust, shared learning, and solidarity.
We have witnessed the incredible results of this approach. To take one example, the program's first partnership in 1984 was with a women's trade union called the Self-Employed Women's Association, or SEWA, located in the western state of Gujarat. At that time, they had 10,000 members in one state of the country fighting for fair wages and recognition of women as workers. Today, SEWA has more than 1.5 million members all over India, organizing women to secure their rights as workers. We are proud that our partnership with SEWA continues after nearly 38 years.
We are all united in a global struggle for justice. The Holding India program is one way that Unitarian Universalists can ally with those on the front lines of that struggle in India. We are so grateful for your solidarity and your support today.
Help out Minika today because I have a strong emotional tie to India. Some of you may know that my daughter spent 4 months in Hyderabad, India, for their study abroad program. I got to visit them there and was overwhelmed by both the beauty and the poverty of this highly populated country and the beautiful people. India had an indelible impact on my daughter and left unforgettable memories for both of us. The Unitarian Universalist Holding Program, India program, was formed in 1984, as he mentioned, through a gift from Jonathan Holding, a lawyer and businessman with a concern for India's economic development. The Holding India program provides aid across many areas and humanitarian relief projects and educational projects. Their approach, as he talked about, is forming these organizational partnerships on the ground. And these partners address justice issues like fighting to enforce land rights for indigenous tribes, setting free bonded laborers, helping poor women take charge of their lives, and demanding dignity and equality for Dalits, the so-called untouchables of India's caste system. Withholding programs help. The partners have dramatically changed the lives of thousands of poor and dispossessed Indians. I just thought I would also mention that the timing is very appropriate. If you don't know, this Wednesday, March 8th, is Holi, an ancient Hindu tradition and very popular festival in Hinduism. The day signifies the triumph of good over evil and is characterized by family and friends getting colorful powders all over each other. I have pictures of that with my daughter. It was crazy. Anyway, I hope you will consider giving generously. Thank you.
Our offering will now be gratefully given and received.
Our first reading today is For a New Beginning by John O'Donohue. In out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the gray promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then the delight, when your courage kindled and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in the new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you.
Folks, before we enter the contemplative time of our service, I want to share that we'll have a new member reception afterwards, and I'd love to see all of you there. So now we enter a time of contemplation in our service that we set aside for prayer and meditation. We'll share a time of silence, we'll hear a spoken prayer, and we'll join in singing Spirit of Life. I invite you to join me now in a time of silence. Loving God, Spirit of life, mystery in which we live and move and have our being, draw near to us this morning and hear our prayers. We give thanks this day for the gift of sunlight and of springtime, for evidence that all around us the earth is our leader and our teacher in the business of new beginnings. Remind us that even when it seems like life will not come back, it surely does. It surely does. Spirit, we come here, some of us anxious about all the worries of life. We come here curious about what we will find. We come here wondering if it will be okay. Remind us to breathe and to listen to that knowing down deep inside. Help us to get what we need, what we came for. Tilt our hearts this morning towards the new, even if we go with fear, with our feet dragging, wondering why we even do this at all. Orient us toward the new beginning that we need, even if we cannot see it yet. May it be so. Amen. I invite us now to join together in singing our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life. Our second reading this morning is called Thin Places by John Crossley Morgan. He writes, I was taking a morning walk down a path outside the Tintern Abbey in Wales when I discovered a rather small but sprawling tree its branches beckoning to travelers who might rest under its shelter. I crawled under the branches and sat quietly to watch the morning sun break across the ancient abbey sky. It felt safe and even sacred there, a place you might go to rest and reflect on the mystery of life. I sensed the presence of others who had sat in that spot before. Later, over lunch, I spoke with a local resident and told him how I had felt sitting under that tree. He looked at me and said quietly, "It's called a thin place." I had never heard the name before, so he patiently explained that to the Welsh, a thin place is a very special place, a sacred spot where you feel a presence so deep and mysterious that you have to stretch language to describe it. That sounds like what inspires poetry, I laughed. In the months that followed, I became more aware of thin places in my life, whether in my backyard garden or by a river. I came to understand that once you feel the power of thin places, you tend to experience them often, in places you might have missed before. More surprisingly, I learned that when you carry a thin place in your mind and heart, you can go there whenever you feel the need. I did not so long ago before I was wheeled into surgery. And now I carry the idea of a thin place where the veil separating this reality from another is temporarily lifted, so faith and imagination can catch a fleeting glimpse. So friends, it is a new month, and we have welcomed many new members to our church today. We also have a new theme. This month we're focusing on generosity. And so I thought that today we dive into the Celtic tradition to see how some of these ancient practices and stories might speak to us today of generosity both with others and also with ourselves. The first thing that I think we really need to understand whenever we're talking about generosity is this idea of scarcity versus abundance. And I remember hearing this talked about first in church as early as 15 years ago, and now it's become more mainstream. Scarcity thinking is really the mentality that there's never enough to go around, whether that's money, time, energy, opportunities. There's not enough to go around, which kind of leads to this obvious conclusion that if there's not enough, I have to get mine. And so being in a scarcity mindset usually involves a lot of anxiety. And I want to name too that some of this feeling of scarcity has been forced upon us by unfettered competition. It's become the way of survival for so many. And when we're thinking about abundance or abundant thinking, there's really like a total contrast. The idea is that there is enough to go around. There's enough for everyone. Or really, like what I've seen more often and what I've really seen here in this place is that we will use what we have collectively to make enough for everyone. My mom has told stories before of her mother, my grandmother Marguerite, always insisting on using the biggest bowl for salad, or of her dad always picking out the biggest ham to share, of always wanting to serve their best to guests. And this is abundant thinking in such a little, simple way. It's probably second nature to so many of us. But abundance is a form of grace that means so much more when we look for context. My grandparents lived through the Great Depression, where there often wasn't enough to go around. They both knew deeply what it was like to lose homes, to lose people, and to be forced to start over in ways that they didn't really want and sometimes didn't think they could. And yet still, despite all of that, to go to a place of enough means so much. I'm certainly not saying that everyone in a tough situation simply needs to think themselves into a different mindset. That's cruel and untrue. But on an institutional level, for institutions like ours, it can be helpful to think in terms of enough. I like to ask the question, what would it be like if such and such? Or what would it look like to? What if it all works out? There are many kinds of generosity. There's being generous with each other and the world around us, and there's also being generous with ourselves, giving ourselves grace, giving ourselves a break, directing some of the compassion we would give to others back inward. And we need both of those for any kind of new beginning. Organizer Margaret Wheatley has encouraged us to ask what's possible, not what's wrong. And Emily Dickinson, along the same lines, famously wrote, "I dwell in possibility." So I would like us to dwell there too. Folks who have been here for a while now will know that I've had many mentors and consider myself to be someone who's always learning. One of my mentors had a practice that she called gathering the graces of each day. And to gather the graces is really like to build an altar in your mind, to lay out the events of each day as objects and to say, this one here, that morning walk, that snuggle from my spouse, that phone call with a friend, that cup of coffee, I call that sacred. That was one of my graces for today. So when you're gathering the graces, I almost picture like silk scarves moving in the wind, something like that. You're training your mind to pull at the threads of life, to look for something beautiful where you might not have seen it before. And in the Celtic tradition, that concept of grace or blessing, that was kind of inherently tied to the natural worlds. There's a common blessing that goes, grace of the love of the skies be thine. Grace of the love of the stars be thine. Grace of the love of the moon be thine. Grace of the love of the sun be thine. And John Philip Newell writes about this blessing. He says, these words belong not so much to a formal religion as to the cathedral of the world, which was what the Celts called the earth, the sky, and the sea. And this concept of finding a sense of grace and childlike wonder at the world around us, it may be so deep within us that we take it almost for granted as part of our spiritual practice. But this inner wisdom goes deep. Newell says, what is unique about the Celtic tradition compared to most other Western traditions is that it cannot be reduced to a set of doctrines or beliefs. Instead, at its core is the conviction that we essentially need to keep listening to what our soul already knows. The Celtic tradition has a strong focus on finding the sacred really in the heart of life, in working, waking, walking, in simply being alive. And I think this tells us something about generosity with ourselves. People have long thought of a spiritual life as one set apart from the world, and there's some wisdom in that. The noise of the world can get really loud sometimes. But I think to live a spiritual life really is to learn to find the sacred in the ordinary, to gather the graces of each day, whatever they may be. It also shows that in terms of spiritual practices, things that rejuvenate the soul, we may not need to learn to pray a certain way, but to learn to see what we may not have before, to find grace where it may have been hiding. The Celts, really to the befuddlement of the Romans, considered the forests and the mountains to be their temples. This was where they might sense the thinness of what they believed to be the next world, or the spirit worlds, where they felt ancestors as present as if on the other side of a door. These thin places are where they and we might sense the inbreaking of the holy. Brian Swimmy writes, "Humans have always been fascinated by genealogical records. We want to know where we came from, the history that leads up to us. But nothing in all genealogical research throughout human history could have separated us from the truth. Several hundred years or several thousand years of a family tree is nothing, for our common family tree fills the universe. Our kin include the living companions on Earth, all the planets and stars, and every galaxy. Cousins all, we spread out until we fill the vast cosmos, end to end. We were there in the distant, terrifying furnace of the primeval fireball, not as mere witnesses either, but as central to the event. Our bodies remember that event, exulting in the majesty of the night sky, precisely because all suffered it together. The planet is a rare and holy relic of every event of 20 billion years of cosmic development. When we deepen our awareness of the simple truth that we are here through the creativity of the stars, we begin to feel fresh gratitude. When we reflect on the labor required for our life, reverence naturally wells up within us. Then, in the deepest regions of our hearts, we begin to embrace our own creativity. What we bestow on the world allows others to live in joy. One of the things that drew me in when I was first taking my trip to Iona last summer was the story of St. Columba. And of course, anytime we talk about saints, we have to understand that the question is not whether we believe that all the stories about them literally happened, but what might these stories have to say to us today? Whereas other churches and institutions might be looking for evidence of their non-humanity, I'm looking for the other side, for what makes them human. So Columba was a man born in Ireland in the 500s. He was a faith-filled child, and as soon as he could, he entered a monastery and became a priest. And the story that's often told about Columba is that during his time in the monastery, he spent his time, as most monks did, copying texts. But it's said that Columba copied a book of Psalms with the intention to keep it for his own use. And this angered his superior and was very shameful to Columba. For whatever reason, this event was a turning point in his life. And though whether he was exiled by his superior or on his own accord is uncertain, what we do know is that Columba left Ireland, a place he loved deeply, as a pilgrim, leaving his old life behind, even though it broke his heart. Pilgrimage in those days, in the 4th century, was not the same as we think of it today, as a kind of spiritual seeking in a new place. Pilgrimage was about penance, of constant exile from the comforts and distractions of the world. And there was a sense of vulnerability associated with it too, a sense that you might not make it. And for Columba, there was a sense that the shame and sadness he felt at having done something wrong, whether that was self-inflicted or not, was so great that he didn't care if he lived or died, that his only choice was to leave and start over somewhere else. Columba washed ashore on an island called Iona in Scotland, and eventually he built a monastery there, doing the same things that monks always did in those days, copying manuscripts, providing pastoral care, teaching other priests, praying, worshiping, doing the business of church. And Iona became a place of teaching. As part of Columba's penance, he wanted to instruct other young priests. I've always been moved by Columba's story of leaving a place you loved with your whole heart because that was your only chance at life. Of new beginnings, not because they're shiny or sparkly, but the real new beginnings, the ones you're forced into, the ones that suck sometimes, the ones that hurt, like ripping off a Band-Aid. How many of us have had to start over in a way we didn't necessarily want? How many of us have had to leave a place we loved for reasons that we didn't? Because even amidst the pain, there is life on the other side, if we are courageous enough to seek it. Buddhist teacher Sharon Salzberg writes, "For me, faith has a lot to do with courage, and it's the courage to step forward into the unknown. And first of all, to admit that we don't know, to actually admit we don't know, and yet to say, I have the strength to go forward anyway. It's connecting to our own deepest strengths so that we're not defined by this circumstance we find ourselves in any given day." And that idea rings true across faith traditions, across centuries. That is where the humanness is found for me. Katie Gelfand writes, "For we know with brave hearts that from every ending of our lives we are sent forth to make a new beginning." And this community too is about to have a new beginning. Soon there will be a new minister here, someone new to get to know. And we have also lost people this year. We have grieved, we have been tired, and at some point we have been or will soon be renewed. Life follows that circle. As we know, saints often have stories about the miracles they perform. These are seen as requirements for sainthood. And for the past few days, I've been mulling over one of Columba's miracles. The story goes that Columba, tired from preaching and pastoral care, went out into the hills on Iona, seeking solitude to pray. And he told his students, "Don't follow me. I'm going off by myself. Just need to take some time. Need to be away for a bit." But of course, the student did follow him, as parents among us may recognize. He followed him, and he saw Columba standing atop a hill, arms outstretched, summoning angels or ancestors, people long gone from this life, talking to them. And of course, the young priest who followed Columba hiding behind a rock was shocked and terrified, but also in awe of this power his teacher had to communicate with the beyond. And it's funny to me that this through line of not always listening to what we're told, both with the book of Psalms that Columba copied and with his student, seemed to flow throughout his life. I wonder, what if we can only really begin again in a different way when we're willing to break away from what we've been taught? When we're willing to break away from scarcity thinking of keeping this magic, keeping the Psalms, keeping the knowledge only for some? What if our new beginning can only come when we realize that our gifts, whether they be summoning angels or making a meal big enough to share, when we realize that they're worth spreading around? So friends, as we begin to close our time together today, I'm thinking about these words that W.E.B. Du Bois wrote. "The prayer of our souls is a petition for persistence, not for the one good deed or a single thought, but deed upon deed, thought on thought, until day calling unto day shall make a life worth living." And so I'm wondering today if we can gather grace upon grace for our new beginning of abundance. May it be so. Amen. I invite us now to rise, either in body or in spirit, and join in singing our closing hymn, Come Thou Fount.
We extinguish this flame, but not our commitment to welcome radically, love boldly, grow spiritually, and serve courageously. This we do because we envision a beloved community filled with compassion, helping all to thrive in a just world.
So friends, I invite you now to join hands as you're comfortable. My prayer for you as we go forth from our time together this morning is that we might open ourselves to a life of abundance, of making enough. Go in peace.
Bum, bum.